Ranter is back to not do a rambling diatribe of the politics of the day, but instead I want to do something else, a little change of pace. Uh, Reason being is that there's plenty going on in our politics and the tragic spread of the coronavirus that we get updates on nearly every hour. We get the finger pointing. We get the briefings that is so gosh darn a ratings blockbuster that, I can go on and on about that, but maybe for now just have a little change of pace. Something that has nothing to do with nothing to do with the stuff that pisses me off. For those who've watched these, you kind of know where my politics goes. You know what I'm mostly in favor of. You know what I'm not in favor of. I'm a little bit more vocal of what I dislike than what I like. So, taking my interest out of the realm of politics and my worry upon the current situation with the coronavirus, I just want to go into the other interests that I have, if you don't mind. I'm 41 years old. I live in Northern Virginia, born in San Jose, California, but I spent the majority of my life here. Uh, my interests, going back from childhood, from school on up, one of my favorite subjects was history, be it American history, American civics, politics, even back then, even politics. As a child, and growing up, I was what you would consider a Civil War buff. I was really interested in the Civil War and the Revolutionary War too, in a sense, but mostly the Civil War. Uh, I really love the old Ken Burns Civil War documentary. I uh, I had recorded that on VHS when it started coming out, and then I got the book from that. Um, I always like I always liked history. You know, it's like the old saying is that if you don't remember your history, you're doomed to repeat it. One of my favorite quotes from Harry Truman was, "Anything new in this world are the histories that you don't know." So I like that. The other aspects that I go into is I'm pretty much a geek. So I do things like even at my age, I still do gaming, do like video games and PC games, some strategy, some fantasy fiction, some role playing games. Um, I'm really big into Guild Wars 2, which is like my primary. But other games I go into is like Star Wars: Old Republic and Star Trek Online. I love the for strategy. I love the Total War series from going back to 2005 with Rome Total War, going up to like Medieval 2 Total War, Empire Total War before that got glitchy and became unplayable. But I love those type of games where it's like it's turn based when you're moving things around, but when you get to the battle, then you're right down on the level where you have thousands of troops that you can control unit by unit, and that piques my mind. Uh, Besides video games, I've been a long time player of Dungeons and Dragons. I started doing that in 1987. I started playing. My father got me into it. We had my own little group here, but then I joined my father's group, and boy, when it comes to that, whatever criticisms people have for the game or the people that play the game, because certainly you can find the geeky aspect of Dungeons and Dragons, but the people I was playing with when I was a child from my father's group was, first of all, being in Northern Virginia, being right next to DC, and given the work that my father did, you get some pretty you got people playing in the game who were lawyers, who were in the Navy, uh, physicists, geniuses. One of the players that we had was a lawyer who read every single technical book and guide. So whenever he played the game, he'd always rule lawyer himself to the best possible advantage. And it was always like a feat of a miracle if any DM who was having to have something attack him actually hit him with something. So that was like a minor accomplishment. But it was always cool when you're sitting around, even at that young age, and you're having these great minds around, and they're playing this creative freaking game where it just inspires not only the role playing aspect, it inspires your mind to thinking all these possibilities in this fantasy world. And just kind of cool, just sitting there watching people strategize and thinking of what they're going to do in a given thing when they're planning. And I went from player to DM, and I actually ran this epic game for my father's group that unfortunately the group disbanded, but the game itself was probably the longest campaign running that they've had, and I had. It, let's see, I think I started that in 2003, and that ended like 2016, 2017. I have to remember which actual year it was. Maybe it was 2018. So yeah, a long-term game, an epic that I kept going and going and going, and they're all there with me, and they're all entertained. So that's kind of an accomplishment to pretty much be a storyteller in an interactive story, getting people not only following along with this story, but being invested in it and contributing into it for a generation, almost pretty much, because of the people who were there originally from the 80s from my father's group to like the new people that would come in that we picked up to tell my ex-girlfriend's niece, who she was a ray of sunshine and who was having fun playing the game, and my stepbrother's sons, or at least one of the sons, little Alan, who's no longer little, he's a tank now. But yeah, it's cool to see like something that I grew up with, that I got involved with, that I went from childhood to young adult to adult with, and seeing the same interest and the same enjoyment of this type of thing in these kids who are younger than me were getting into it just as I was getting into it. So that's kind of cool. So what else? Besides the entertainments, besides the tabletop and the PC and video games and all that other stuff that clearly an adult should be involved with, I also, had my own musical awakenings in the early 90s. Now, I was blessed in that aspect to living essentially in a musical house. From my mother, from my father, to my brothers. My mother, I mean, if you see her, because she's on the middle America side, as the name is my father. My mother's just your old, stereotypical old hippie. I would never say she's stereotypical about anything. But she loved the classic rock music, and she has a voice on her. You have to catch her when she sings, but when she does, she's amazing. My father grew up. I remember my father ever so often like getting the guitar out and just playing on that. But help and musical talent from our family, it has to be my brother David, who bounced around from band to band, who can sing, who can do the instruments. He had a encyclopedia of music, and it's just it's good. It has good memories to listen to not only the band rehearsing in the basement of our house, but oh, hello Willow. Thank you for bouncing the laptop. But when the song, all right, I have to tell the story. When the song "Jump Around" came out by House of Pain, my mother hated it. And the reason why she hated it is because my brother David decided to play it on a loop for like an hour, like almost every day. So, she would cringe every time that first couple of notes would hit, where it's just nice, almost and gentle compared to everything else that's about to hit from this song. And dun 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 dun, oh nice, and then wah. That's just she kind of like physically flinched every time she heard it, and sometimes she had to bang on the door in the basement to try to get him to stop, like he's playing at full blast. So I grew up with that. I grew up with watching my brothers recording music videos in the '80s and watching those tapes. Um, I remember. One time when my cousin Donna was staying with us for a bit, that she was very big into Poison, and there was like a radio, you know, contest where you call in at the time, and you can like get tickets to see Poison, and so was it radio or was it? I don't know if it was actually radio. It was actually no, it wasn't radio. It was like an MTV thing. So you had to watch MTV and wait for like a special time or a special time when the phone number would flash, and then you go and you immediately call it. And it was like me and my brother PJ, which is my eldest brother. So we're helping Don we're helping Donna out by watching MTV, and pretty much it's like rerun after rerun after rerun of the videos that we already saw. I mean, after that night, I could I could probably sing "Sweet Child of Mine" on a loop because that was playing on a loop, as well as a few other songs of the time and place. So, with that in the background for the music side, I got involved with my own enjoyment in music in the early mid '90s. Uh, I actually went and skipped school, or at least skipped half of school, the half end of school with my girlfriend at the time, and we went across the street to where the strip mall was, as we had the school on one side, the shopping center was on the other side, and there was this great record and tape place that that had CDs in there, and since it was the like mid early '90s, I just gravitated towards grunge. So I bought for my first set of CDs for myself, since I didn't really have. I had one CD beforehand before I really got into music, and that was Grateful Dead. So Touch of Grey, which I now have. But but that day rather, I picked up Pearl Jam's 10, Stone Temple Pilots Core, Nirvana's Nevermind. I think I got Counting Crows too. But Pearl Jam and Pearl Jam, Stone Temple Pilots, and Nirvana was pretty much the backbone at that time. Then my taste in music diverged outward, and I got into your Metallicas and Guns N' Roses, and but my taste kept going more eclectic, and I got into almost everything. I can touch a little bit of like heavy metal, touch a little bit of rap, touch a little bit of southern rock. Got really into classic rock, which I'm still into, and it's kind of sad. At 41 years old, I now know what the people were 41 years old when I would be like 10, and then they would complain about when they listen to the music and they go, "What? That's classic rock? That's not classic rock because I lived through that. That's not classic rock yet." And now, alas, you can at 2020, you can call things like Guns N' Roses, Motley Crue, and even Pearl Jam, at least the early stuff, you can all call that classic rock. Alas, I'm getting old. Anyway, so yeah. That music just clicked onto my head, and I just ran with it ever since. The only thing I never got into, I didn't get into country. There's just nothing appealing about country to me. And there's even some songs that I like from bands like Charlie Daniels Band in Alabama. Play me some mountain music. And it's just like, there's a yeehaw in there in the end. It's like, oh, that's country. It's like, no, 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 no. That's not country. No. What do you mean it's not country? No, that's called Southern rock. See, there's a crowbar separation between country and Southern rock. Southern rock is still in the same vein as classic rock, like Creedence Clearwater Revival or Leonard Skinner. So that's not quite that over there. That's that over there. All right. Glad we understand each other. Did you even ask anything about this? And okay. But yeah, still geeky in my old age. Not because I still enjoy the games and tabletop games and so forth. Even though, unfortunately for myself, if I wanted to get back into D&D, I probably can't because first of all, with what's going on with the virus, it's making it kind of difficult to have social gatherings, and doing the Roll20 programming. There's a program to do this online, actual programming with so forth that just goes over my head. Maybe I'm set in my ways, because as you can tell from my rapidly bookshelf of chaos here, that is not quite neat. Neither is my mind, as you can tell. I have loads and loads of these books, and they're rapidly going unread or underused. But yeah, I would love to try the game again, and I miss it. And I don't know if it's missing it on the aspects of being that creative and setting the table for the players and having them interact in the world that I've created. Because as a storyteller, as someone who does write, I do write. It's an accomplishment to watching people play in the world that you create and them enjoying themselves and looking forward to coming back to it, like the next couple of weeks or whatever all the sessions are. And I miss that. But on a personal level, it's also it's like one of the things that me and my father were connected on, and that's another thing I miss, because it's not too many instances that one can derive pride of anything one does, depending on the one. But being able to be creative, being able to even get him enjoying like the work that the creative fun work of writing this stuff out, and him playing in it with everybody else, and him enjoying himself like everyone else and laughing like everyone else at the right moments when it comes and goes. So that's kind of a like a personal accomplishment, which I enjoyed. Wistful. It's now just wistful. Oh yeah. Segue for that. Yeah, I do write. The problem is that as creative as I am, like when I was younger, I could draw, and I could like draw whole scenes out, sketch out images from books and so forth. But now in my mind, I don't know, is just the concentration is going because of age, or just responsibilities of everything else that's going on in life, not just now, but last few years. If I wanted to draw, I can't even finish a single character in what I'm drawing, even though I have like an image in my head of what I want to do. It's just then it just halfway through, it's like, oh, there's a bird or something. And it's the same thing as I'm writing, is I get inspired to write these various things. I have, like for example, I had like a prototype story that I was working that I was like almost done with. You know, this is cliche, but it's not really writer's block per se. It's just like, you know, you go through this material stuff, and then your ending kind of like fades off. It was a vampire story, and it was like it was a story. Not to go too much detail into it, but it was a story of the idea that like the government knew that vampires existed, and they're trying to keep it under wraps. That they didn't want the regular people to know that there was like this like North American like feudal house of vampires who were working with the government to ease the acknowledgement of them into society. These vampires are not, you know, they're they're, they're they try really hard not to be killers or anything. That you know they drink from IV bags or they have donors that they keep alive. I try to emphasize in the stories that you know vampires don't need to drain someone to death in order to sustain themselves. Sometimes they just need a mouthful if they need to, and it's not just like sustaining their own life. It's for enhancement of their own power. So as they go over the ages, and the more they feed, the more powerful they get. If they don't, they stay the same. They don't die or anything. They don't reduce. They just stay stagnant. So, but it's almost like yeah, if it, I don't know, would be a good analogy, but the story would be like prior to people knew about vampires in True Blood, like this, like how True Blood is set out, where everyone knew the vampires existed, or they found out that vampires existed, and then they synthesized True Blood as what they were going to be drinking, but they worked them into society that way. This story that I was doing was like just before that, like how are they going to introduce vampires into society without there being a panic or violence or whatever. So I had the story working out, and then you know, and the same like concentrations like started fading away, and I don't even think the file itself or where the story is on my older laptop, and yeah, it's like you it is the weirdest thing. It's the same type of concentration issue of what the drawing, with the writing, and it's with like the interest in certain entertainments. Is that you know I could like binge watch into Star Trek. I'm really big into Star Trek from the movies and all the TV shows. I don't have CBS Prime or Access or whatever it's called for me to see Discovery or Picard. So I get reviews off of that, which unfortunately is mixed for both shows. Um, but you know, but something like Star Trek or something like House or any of these shows, I would have an interest in, and I'd watch. And then at some point, I just lose the interest, and I go on to something else. Either I binge watch something else, or I just don't. Um, Unfortunately, because of how we are in our world, this is like the only thing I'm watching these days is you know pro wrestling, which is my other entertainment hobby, and politics. As you can tell, I watch a lot of politics and complain about politics and certain people in politics who shouldn't be in politics because they're unqualified and disqualified and is a disgrace to defiling our country. But leaving that aside, so yeah, and sort of segueing into the last portion of this, which is the TV shows and movies that I get into. Movie aspects, I do like science fiction, I do like comedies, I do like dramas. I like music. I'm eclectic. I go through all the spectrums, from horror movies, suspense movies, comedies, science fiction, fantasy. Um, I could sit down and watch one of my favorite horror movies, Exorcist 3, where it's just like just watching that. The background stuff is like so surreal. There's like a lot of things that are going on in the background while there's a lot of things going on in the foreground, which is like kind of artistic in a way. George C. Scott's performance in this is like masterful in how he can fly out his emotion whenever he's like really, really mad, or he draws out a story about a carp. He tells a story about a carp to his buddy who's a priest, where he talks about his mother-in-law has come up from Virginia, and she brings a carp to eat. It's a tasty fish. He has nothing against it. Then, but because carps are full of impurity, she buys them live. So it's been swimming in his bathtub, and he hates it. He can't stand the sight of it. He can't go home until the fish is asleep, because if he sees the fish swimming up and down in his bathtub, moving its gills, he will shoot it because he's a cop. But you see when he does this thing with his priest buddy and he's explaining it to him, the camera's slowly pushing in while he's telling the story, and he's like up close to him. You see the actor who's playing the priest. He's trying not to break up. He's trying not to laugh because George C. Scott is not saying this in a funny story. He's saying this in a serious, like, 1,000-yard stare at the priest. He's like, "You're standing pretty close to me, my friend. You know I haven't had a shower in a week because I cannot go into the bathroom with that carp swimming up and down." He was just very serious on this. It is the movie itself is awesome in a way of how it's very surreal. All this, like I said, stuff in the background that you probably don't even notice. Like he's having a dream sequence where he's in like this it's like a train station waiting to go to heaven. So there's all these angels about and all these dead people, and in the very beginning, a little boy gets killed. He gets crucified on a pair of roaring oars, and he shows up in his dreams, and he says, I'm sorry that you died. I miss you too," and walks by. And one of the things is that his priest buddy dies the same night, and he's getting a tarot card reading by this angel. The angel is Patrick Ewing as an angel. He's the angel of death, and he's reading about his tarot cards. That's a weird little tidbit of one of the many surreal things that happens in this movie. But the best part of the movie is freaking Brad Dourif, who plays the Gemini killer, or at least the spirit of the Gemini killer that has possessed the body. And they do this really weird, cool trick because the actual body that this spirit has possessed is Damien Karras from the first Exorcist. So it's that actor. But then when he explains that he's a Gemini killer, the face changes because then it's Brad Dourif, because Brad Dourif is the actual Gemini killer. So now, at this point on, that's the representation, even though it's supposed to be the actor that playing Damien Karras. And he chews the scenery. I mean, it's like up close, and he's talking right into the camera. All these horrible, horrible things that he's doing, to the point where George C. Scott's character is hearing all this stuff, and he just punches him. He just punches him in the head. He just breaks his nose because he just couldn't stand hearing it for more. And even when he does it, Brad Dourif just stares and smiles at him. He's like tears coming down his face because he broke his nose. And you're issuing a clear invitation to the dance. And what's that? He says, "Never mind." It's so creepy. It's like one of my favorite movies. Anyway. But yeah, I'm gonna go into that. So I love various different types of movies. I'm obviously very big on the Marvel movies because I'm also a comic book geek. So I got a whole holder of them. My movie collection. If I ever wanted to expand my fledgling YouTube career here, outside of just ranting about politics, and wanted to do movie reviews, and if I wanted to do my collection, I could at least have 100 episodes from movies of all different types. I mean, going back to like Ten Commandments and Spartacus and Ben-Hur and Cleopatra, going all the way up to contemporary movies that I have. You know, You go from those old movies to like up to date movies like the Grand Budapest Hotel, which is my current favorite comedy. Um, Again, Marvel movies is my latest thing. Love all the Star Trek movies. All love all the Star Wars movies. Even the Star Wars movies that no one likes. Um, I can still find entertainment out of them. I find entertainment out of the prequels. Sometimes it's really hard to find it, but I find it. Like for instance, for Phantom Menace, I I roll with I tolerate it. I tolerate it. I kind of fall asleep during the pod race because that doesn't interest me whatsoever. But that ending, at the end, when they're in that hangar, those doors open, there stands Darth Maul. It's just like, this is why I'm watching the movie. This right here. He just stands there and he sort of looks up, and you know what's on then. So yeah, that was my favorite part of that movie. Attack of the Clones is harder and harder to find anything remotely because of that romance just is so done. Yeah, no. Again, the last part of all the Jedi's come out and all the sabers are flying, and that big fight at the end, that was the only value on that. The third one, throughout the whole movie, I liked. But in this current new ones, uh, the new set of sequels, I like those too. But I do see the problems in them. But regardless of the problems, I still find the entertainment value out of them. So I'm not as much critical on them as others are. Again, if I got into it, if I actually expanded and went into that frame, then I would go into detail about it. But I'm not going to go into detail about it. And from Star Wars, the Star Treks, from the movies, the TV shows, like I said, I like Star Treks. Um, I was addicted to House, and I would binge watch that in a nanosecond, um, because of my politics and my quirky sense of humor. I like Frasier. Um, I was big into Law and Order, the original series, more than SVU and the other spin-offs. I mean, I love watching Law and Order from the beginning to its end, and seeing how you can tell the differences in like social tolerances and what was contemporary, the problems of the day. Like for the first couple of seasons of Law and Order, it was issues of racial tolerance, because a lot of the people that they're supposedly going after, or the people that were committing the crimes, were like black folk in New York, and from 1990 on up, then you're starting to get the flip side of it. And they do some excellent episodes, because one of the the ADA's assistant, uh, who who is this black lawyer, who he has a lot of great episodes, or prosecutor rather, a lot of great episodes where he had to deal with people, and people were calling him out on his race, you know, and you see how they're trying to depict, you know, it's not like a level playing field. It's always fluctuating. It's always something going on that he has to deal with, that his boss doesn't ever have to deal with, but he has to deal with. And the cool thing about him was that his character changes, because the first two seasons he was the assistant to Ben Stone, and he disappears. Later on, he comes back as a defense attorney, and actually in episode there he's introduced as the defense attorney. He actually pulls some fast ones, because he knows the prosecutor's office, and he swindles the judge because he knows Ben Stone, and he remembers a conversation that the judge had with Ben Stone and him that floored him about something about race or whatever, and the judge like recused himself out of it, because he threatened to bring Ben Stone back to testify that he said this, and like the next scene, the actual actual district attorney goes, Ben Stone's in Europe. He was not going to be able to comment. So it's like, cool. He just swindled the guy to his advantage. So that was like kind of clever. So yeah, I like the Law and Orders. I liked House. I liked Monk. So yeah, that's all my forms of entertainment. Um, when I'm rambling on about all this, is just, I don't know, something else to ramble about instead of politics, instead about Donald goddamn Trump, the freaking coronavirus, and all the fears that we're having. You know, I could I could say a lot of things has gone through my life, from my experience, from my point of view. It doesn't mean it's more than anybody else. That's more dramatic than anybody else. Is more tragic than anybody else. Because we can only interpret through our own experience. When you don't know anything about something, if you don't have experience in something, you can like read it in a book. You can retain knowledge of it. You can retain facts from it. But if you don't experience it, then you don't live it. You don't feel it. Um, and there's a lot of portions that goes on in life that I have no experience with, and unfortunately, there are some aspects of myself that's a little stunted. I do, for me, why I get so passionate about politics and what's going on and who's involved in politics these days is, you grow up with the idealism of this country. I said this multiple times, multiple videos. As someone who like went to school in the '80s, early school, you while you were learning your ABCs in kindergarten or in first grade, you were also hearing, patriotic songs about your country. When you first touch a history book, it tells you about Columbus landing, or Columbus finding America, finding the New World. You don't realize till later that the Vikings uh, got ahead of him by some 400, 500 years, and founded the northern aspect of it, but no one ever listened to Vikings to know if there was a continent between Europe and Asia. You don't, I didn't hear until late into high school, not even taught in high school, about America Vespucci, and our continent is named after him. But the point about this part is that you grow up and you got to get indoctrinated, at least into the idealism and nationalism of your country. And when you get older, with this thinking in mind, you craft your own political ideology, your footprint in the realm of politics. If you're going to be a Republican or a Democrat, you know what 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 you understand, what you believe in, what political stances they have that you agree with or what you don't agree with. You know, if you asked me as I was a kid, without any not any understanding about things, I'd sure, yeah, I'm a Republican because I grew up in a time of Reagan, and Reagan was all but deified in the public mind. Sure, he had plenty of critics, and when you get older and you understand the criticism, then you get, yeah, he was no deity. But at the time of the '80s, oh, oh no, there was no one higher than Reagan. And George Bush Sr., when you were a fifth grader to sixth grader and the Gulf War was happening, and you'd be up late at night because you'd be watching news coverage, and you would be sitting there in your home and you're watching, let's say, news coverage from Tel Aviv, and you're actually watching Scud missiles flying overhead with the commentators hoping and praying that it overshoots their targets, which most of the time they did. You remember that first bombing in Baghdad when the news reporters were stuck in that hotel. I was a kid. I remember that. I remember that as well as I remember where I was in 9/11. You know, and at the time with George Bush Sr., how do I put this in the correct terminology here? He he did the thing where a lot of presidents do, where he reassures you. He gives you confidence of what's going on. He told you what was going on, but he was like, "We're gonna get through this, and it's gonna be okay." And he was awfully popular at the time of the Gulf War, and I don't I don't see too many marks against him other than the "Read my lips, no new taxes," where death knell after that. But when you asked when I was younger, yeah, Reagan, Bush, yeah, Republican. Then you get old. Then I got older. Then I got understanding a few things, and then I feel that some of the things I believed in didn't jive with that. And I go, no, okay, I'm not doing that. So I went Democratic. The first person that I voted for when I turned 18 was Bill Clinton for his second term. So that was my first foray to actually getting into politics and the voting point. And then going up from there. I am not lockstep with the Democratic Party, as you would think, as the stereotype is that you would think an average Republican is lockstep with the Republican Party. When I mean lockstep, I mean checking off all those boxes. Because I don't check off all those boxes for Democrats. Not all of them. Most of them. And I think that's fair, and I think that's something that people need to consider, especially when they're doing the voting, especially when you have these, especially on the Democratic side, that does these purity checklists of how progressive they are. If you can get, for us on our end, our voting end, we're not going to get everything we want. You're not going to get 100% agreement with your candidates. They should be lucky that they get 80% of us in agreement, or 75%. If you have enough agreement that supersedes the disagreement, then that leaves room for compromise, and then that's cool, and you can go and do what you need to do with that. But unfortunately, not only we are polarized in our two parties, and polarized, in being for Trump or against Trump, but we're also polarized in our own party. I mean, we're seeing evidence of that even with this coronavirus incident, this tragedy that we're having to deal with, and we're going to be dealing with for a long while now. That we see that what is best for the country gets superseded of what's best for these parties, because this is an election year, and so people are more worried about, if I follow this, then these people might not like that. What's best for us should be the point. During World War II, during our depression that we were going through, when we got involved in that, we kicked ourselves in our own ass, from our government on down to our industries, to say, you know what, we have to do this. We have to turn over the auto industries and start making them turn out tanks and jeep and trucks and jeeps. We had to get munitions out. We have to have people selling war bonds. And, as a tragedy as that war was for the world and ourselves, that also ended the Depression. because necessity is the mother of invention. We are in a situation where necessity is the mother of our invention, from the ventilators to the masks, the gloves. We're going to have to kick ourselves in the ass again for our own survival, for making sure that people don't get sick. And when people do get sick, hopefully they can ride it out and then they can be fine afterwards. Didn't want to be about politics. I'm trying not to, and I'm not be about the virus, but it's kind of like the tail end of this. But I'm trying to explain myself and what I mean for all this. You know, I try to have friends on both sides, on all sides. I'm a fixture on the Facebook group Middle America, which is run by Vin and Sori. They have a great YouTube community. They do music reviews mostly. Vin does Middle America on YouTube, which is his political, where he talks politics. Sori has a more personal one for her and her family and that aspect of it, which is also adorable and cute. And you know, it's good to watch. It's good to watch for your soul when you see things where these are good people. These are good people. It's good family. The Facebook group that they run that I'm on is eclectic in terms of it's not one political voice. It's a free speech zone, so everyone's invited. Everyone can speak their mind. You're not threatening people, and you're not being unnecessarily insulting, and you're getting off track of the topic. Everything is involved. Trump supporters, Trump resistors, everyone in between. Bernie supporters, establishments, so forth. And I get into debates with people, sometimes fights with people, but mostly debates. And we debate each other and we disagree with each other, but we're also respectful to each other. I don't try to fight with anybody in anger. And I hope they don't either. But, I approach it because I want to not only challenge my point of view and defend my point of view, I want to hear their point of view. Because what we miss when we are in our own camps is that we get lost in the stereotyping of the other side. So, and this is like the same problem that if you do not have a voice, certain places, all you have is a vacuum, and you only have people speculating and stereotyping and thinking the worst of you because you're not there to explain yourself and express your point of view. So if you're not there for that, they can assume whatever the hell they want because you're not there. That's a problem in 2016 with certain people that should have gone to certain places and maybe should be president now. Be that as it may. Point of that is that I try to be friendly, even if I'm being obnoxious, and I do tend to be an asshole at sometimes. But I would think we all want to. It is an example. Middle America is an example of what it should be. It should be all of us being able to talk to each other, being able to disagree, being able to agree, but in any event, shake hands and say, I disagree, but do what you're going to do. I'm going to do what I do. That's cool. And some of these people I consider my friends. So, there's that. Alright, in any event, it is a nice, cool windy day out in somewhere in Northern Virginia, and I'm going to take advantage of that by taking a nap. So, thank you all for those who actually listen to me rant and, not even rant, just ramble on about myself. Because for this time period, I just wanted to talk about something other than Trump and coronavirus. And all the stuff in between. The ranter rants because the urge to rant is rising. And when it rises again, I will be back and the usual suspects will be discussed. Thanks, guys and gals.